All right. Hello, everyone. How's it going? I'm back. I missed last Wednesday. We were out traveling as a family, and I was going to record kind of like an off-stream session of me continuing on this. And I started doing a little bit of work, and then it was like Monday, and I was like, may as well just wait till Wednesday and do it live. So, yeah, thank you all for joining again. Let's kind of jump right back in. And hey, Daryl. Hey, Zool. That is a disturbing profile pic. Oof. I don't know if I was ready for that. Adrian, what's going on? Yeah, the gang's all here. All right, so yeah, I'll kind of recap if you didn't watch part one, so don't worry. We just kind of implemented some stuff here. But yeah, basically I have this create worker, and there's still some to-dos here. There's still some backfilling of tests. Again, all this is kind of a spike just to see that it works. So let's kind of go through these workers that I've made. Again, I started making this destroy worker, haven't gotten that far. So let's just start at the top and fill in the blanks, and hopefully we'll end with destroy worker, which is kind of the last piece of the puzzle. So we have this create worker. And this job is basically going to get spawned or kicked off or dispatched, I guess is the right word, where we actually call out and kind of make a shift worker. So a lot of this is like kind of additional stuff here to do. So some of this stuff deals with DigitalOcean, which I'll do off stream, but we do need to kind of like fix this name based on worker number. Let's get rid of this sidebar. We get a little more room here. Yeah, so we send this. If we get a response, blah, blah, blah. Someone was telling me off stream, and this was actually pretty cool. I didn't realize you could just do throw here. So basically, if this has any kind of failed response, it actually just taps that exception, goes ahead and does any kind of callback if you have one. Otherwise, that exception is basically thrown. So that's pretty cool. So I can deal with their exception. I don't necessarily need the could not create worker. I'll want the response from DigitalOcean to kind of know what happened anyway. So this is again, was just a spike. So we've got this throw, and I guess PHP Storm's going to complain because it throws a request. No big deal. So we can kind of clean that up a bit. And then we effectively get the droplet ID from this and pass it on. Now there was more things we need to do here, like to do. Do we need to or I guess we should track creation of worker? I don't really know. We talked about putting some things in the cache so we kind of know which droplets are out there, but all this stuff is getting passed to the next bit here. So let's just kind of keep going deeper. Check worker now is basically going to be another job that once we create a worker, this job will actually kind of just wait and listen for that. It has a bit of back off. That was kind of a fancy thing. So it's going to back off by 2 minutes, then it's going to back off by 5 minutes. So theoretically, this, spawning up a DigitalOcean droplet from an image probably, take 3-4 minutes, maybe, probably not even. But again, this job is going to basically run and retry itself for about 10 minutes to see that job got picked up. So again, we can do kind of the same optimizations we have here. This is just going to call a little status here. I don't even know if we care about the throw there, to be honest. We definitely want it to throw, but I just don't know if I care that much about this exception. I wonder if you can can you return something else from a job instead of, can you say this, retry? No. All right, well, we'll keep throw for now. I don't want to get flooded with a bunch of exceptions. It's not necessarily, I guess if this fails, I'd want to know. So that's fine. So the throw there is fine. Now, if the droplet status is not active, meaning it's not ready, worker not active yet, again, no big deal. I can just set this up to be ignored. And again, we can even make a custom exception here of something like worker status, you know, pending exception or something like that. So for now, we'll just leave this, and I know, you know, worker not active yet, not a big deal. I can ignore those in my bug tracker. And then finally, yes, here is where we would want to increment the worker count. We want to kind of keep track of the workers that are there. Maybe the same thing, like we would want to track worker ID. I don't really know. We'll find out. And then we're going to dispatch a destroy worker job where we basically add 40 minutes to this. We're going to delay that job. So we're going to allow this worker to run for 40 minutes, and then we're going to check to see its queue status. So this is the final piece of the puzzle. So all these are a bunch of jobs, and originally we thought, okay, well, maybe we'll make them all like a batch job, but that's not really how it works. This really works more in regards of like a sequence of jobs, and I appreciate that that's you know, that's a very fine wording there, but these all don't run together per se. They run one after another if the previous job had succeeded. So while there might be a fancy way to batch that and turn on like job stopping and all that kind of stuff, I think it makes a little more sense that each one of these jobs triggers or dispatches the next job, you know, on success. We don't know if all these jobs are necessarily going to run or when they're going to want to run. And because of some of this back off and these retrying capabilities, I think sequencing these out makes a little more sense, because my understanding of a batch is when that job fails, it's going to just go on to the next job depending on how you've configured that. It's not going to really allow it to be retried and then reach that it's successful. I don't know. Again, I'd have to check all that. But again, this feels more intuitive to me than trying to kind of understand the intricacies of batching. And does it continue after the job has completely failed, meaning that all of its retries have been attempted? Or, you know, would it play on to the next batch job simply after it failed the first time, right? Failure is a little bit of a tricky thing in jobs. You definitely want to check that out. I've been bitten by that before, where the failed method, you know, maybe isn't called when you think it is, or it's called every time, or things like that. So you really want to check that out. Anyway, we're going to play these on. We have this processing job here. So if it is, we'll just throw a runtime exception that it's still processing jobs, so of course we wouldn't want to destroy it. And similarly, this thing has a back off, I think, of another 40 minutes. So DigitalOcean is billed by the hour. There's a little bit of setup time for the structure. We know that it's going to run within an hour, so if it doesn't, check it again, you know, roughly an hour later. So I think we could probably bump this up to be like 50 minutes or something like that. You know, that's all just kind of me tweaking it after the fact. But that's kind of why you see these numbers here again, and retry it multiple times. And then finally, of course, if this thing were to fail, we basically, you know, I'd probably want to get an email or something. So that's all kind of like to do, right? So we have this failed, I think. I always forget if it's fail or failed. I think it's failed, but let's just leave this here for a second. And this is basically like, send me an email. I would want to know that after 4 hours, basically, that my queues are still running in this capacity, right? Maybe I've made a logic bug is pretty likely, because most of the time the shift queue workload, even right now with one dedicated server, the queue workload would never be backed up more than 4 hours. That would be an epic shift day, or a day where like Laravel tagged multiple releases in a day, which they have before. But under this new thing where multiple workers are going to be attacking that, again, that would have to be like the biggest shift day ever in history. So send me an email with a thumbs up, because that's a good day. Hey Mark, how's it going? Hey Samuel. Andreas, what about chains? Yeah, again, I think job chains are definitely possible here, where we could batch some jobs or chain them to be then and whatever. But I know this works, I guess, is the bottom line. And I don't want to necessarily spend the time right now on the stream to go figure out the intricacies of that, because again, I'm relying on the fact that some of these jobs are going to get retried with a very specific back off. And I don't know if that happens if I just went in and made a job chain of check, create worker, check worker, destroy worker. If I made that in a job chain, like, is it going to go check the worker, and then when check worker fails, it's going to go immediately try to destroy it? Of course, nothing's going to be on the queue because it hasn't even started yet. So again, spawning these jobs after I know a success status from the previous job, my internal success status, not necessarily what Laravel deems successful for a job to complete, right? And again, I know you can configure all that in chains. We looked at that in part 1, but this just feels at the moment a little more intuitive to me. I know that if I spawn one of these jobs off, that the next job is going to be spawned on success, and I don't have to worry about just immediately dumping a bunch. So, okay, so let's go back to the very beginning here. There's some to-dos that we need to kind of work through here, right? Okay, cool. So to-do, handle multiple droplet creation. Okay, so what we would need to do here is effectively, I think we just would simply wrap this in a loop. So for each workers as worker. So that's pretty straightforward stuff there. We could even do an old school for while, but or well, no, we can't do a for each workers. This we actually have to do an old school for loop. So we'll just do I is equal to 0. Workers, or I is less than workers. I haven't written a for loop in so long. And then we'll just increment I, right? Okay, so we have workers. So workers is 1, so 0 is less than 1. So we're just gonna loop over those workers. And here is where we basically just do all of this inside of that, right? And so we need to make this a bit dynamic. I'm not worried about this to-do. I'll have to dig that out of DigitalOcean later. I even need to make an image to that point. But we can get this name going here. So the shift worker, instead of 1, 2, 3, 4, this is most definitely going to be, so this is like worker equals, it would be 1 plus whatever was in the cache for the worker count. And then we would need to increment that cache at the end of this. Yeah. Okay, so we have 1 plus cache increment. I don't think we want to increment it just yet. But we also can't create a bunch of workers. We would need to track how many workers we're attempting to create. Yeah, let's write this. I'll talk a little more about why I'm hesitant here. But anyway, let's say cache get, and I think it's like shift workers, and I think you can give it a default. So let's get that, and then can you do default? I always forget. Yeah, default. Okay, so the default here would be 1. If it's somehow not set, we would. Okay, so that's our worker, and we'll just dot that here. All right. So we've got our worker. So if we have 1 worker, which we do already, we're immediately going to go up to worker 2, right? So this will be our second worker, and then worker 3, worker 4, worker 5, blah, 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 all the way up. So now we would want to track that at this point we've gotten a droplet ID back, and it actually was a successful call to begin creating that. And therefore, we would want to say cache increment, let's say shift workers. And then does this, I think this takes a default if it's not set. Yeah, the value's 1. But is that the starting value? I always forget. Is this here? Increment? No, it's not. Is this in here? Increment. Okay, so increment, store, increment, key value. Increment the value mixed. Oh, is this the amount to increment it? Yeah, this is a little bit tricky because increment the value of an item in the cache. Let's go to the Redis store implementation. Increment by. Yeah, okay. It increments by the value. Okay. We can't simply increment it. It may not be set. I think we're going to have to do a little checking here. So we'll say if cache has shift workers, then I really don't want to do this every time. Let's do this. Let's just increment it, call it off, and then up here, if it not, yeah. I'm sure cache has some kind of like set if not set, right? Put if, do they have some kind of put if? No. Okay, well, whatever. Cache put shift workers 1. All right, so if for some reason we're calling this and the shift workers have not been set, then we automatically do that, right? And then we're going to kind of pre-increment it in our code so we get a worker count here. And I really don't feel like the shift workers would ever be a crazy number. But just for giggles, let's do an s printf here of %s and then %02d, I think is what you do. I always forget. Anybody know that off the top of their head? If I want this to like, so let's say I wanted this to be like shift worker 02 here, right? Would be like the very first one. I think that's how you do it. 0 padded digit, or maybe that has to be an S. I always forget. We'll leave it 02D. I think that's right, if my long years with PHP don't fail me. Let's see what we're saying in the chat. Adrian, I use range for each range 1 to the worker as, yeah, that's cool. As we've seen so far in the stream, I'm feeling old school PHP-ish today, so let's also use sprintf appropriately. Okay, so I think we have what we need there. Sprintf, all good. Okay, so now at this point we're incrementing the worker and then we're sending the droplet on. Now I don't necessarily want to track this droplet yet because again it hasn't necessarily been created and added to the queue. So we're going to delay this job by 2 minutes to kind of theoretically give this enough time. Oh, it looks like I have over. All right, hopefully everyone can hear me now. Again, sorry about that. I just noticed that my webcam overheated for some reason. I think I changed one of the lights around in the room, so let me know you can hear me okay. You won't be able to see me, but hopefully you can hear me again. Let me know. And let's just adjust. Let's just go back to full screen. Will drop me off. Will drop me off that. Okay, so hopefully everybody can still see the screen and hear me okay. Sound's still okay. All right, cool. All right, so hopefully that's fine. I might be a little more echoey since I'm using the built-in microphone now. So, can you hear me now? Make sure everybody can hear me okay. All right, cool. Let me know in the chat. Sounds like everyone can hear me. All right, let's get back to it here. We're not tracking the droplet ID, so I'm actually just going to go ahead and inline that because who likes temporary variables? and we'll dispatch that and we'll delay it. So Adrian, you're only one person, okay? You can't speak for we, all right? You're only one person. All right, I think this is pretty good. We can pass this in with multiple workers. They're gonna get called out to DigitalOcean, and for each one that's called out, we're gonna ask to check that. Okay, thanks, Mark. Okay, now we got the we. All right, good stuff. Apologies for any echo. Yeah, I had a meeting right before this too, so I think it overheated from that. Okay, so we're going back to check worker now, and now these jobs are basically going to run individually. We would never want to default that, so just a little catch there. And again, I'm going to backfill a bunch of tests on this, but let's just kind of keep hacking this out. If it's not active, it's just going to go on there. We've already incremented the worker count, so we really don't need to do that anymore. And the backoffs all feel good. I don't think we need to track worker ID because we're passing it in the dispatch all the time. So I think we're okay here. All right, cool. Yeah, and then we'll tag this off by 40 minutes on the first dispatch here. Okay, so now let's go and fill in destroy worker. So same concept here. We're going to back off by 50 minutes each time. It gets a droplet ID. If we're processing jobs, then we wouldn't even want to destroy this. So this will just get thrown back on the queue because of the exception. Otherwise, we're going to check on this particular droplet, and if there were any issues, we would throw. So again, it would get put back on the queue. If for some reason we don't get a 204 no content, which is what DigitalOcean returns for this particular endpoint, then we would want to know that the worker could not be destroyed, and that is the particular ID. So again, I would want to know that. And then finally, we decrement shift workers, which I believe is what we incremented here. Great, so we know that the worker is gone. Now, here is why you would want to track the individual. Here's why you'd want to track the individual thing. Theoretically, if we think about this, let's say shift is under heavy load, and I spawned up 3 workers. So let's just say we've got worker 2, 3, or well, let's be fancy here. We've got 02, 03, and 04. And I'm now starting to tear down the workers. So these jobs are all out there. They're floating out there. They have back off. Things are happening. Maybe these workers all weren't created at the same time. And now I come in here and destroy 03, right? So I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to decrement my shift worker count. And now shift gets under load again before 04 is gone. So 03 is destroyed. And then increase in queue workload happens. And then now shift, because of this decrement, is going to go in and try to create another 04. Whoops. So this actually isn't, that's actually not going to work so well. I don't think the naming matters 100%, to be honest, but we might need to do something a little bit fancier here when we create the workers. So, yeah, I think keeping a general count of how many workers we have makes sense. That's fine. That can be for like I would never want to spawn more than a certain number of workers. So in that case, like that's actually another check we would want to do here. If for some reason like create worker ever got called and we already have like too many workers, then I would want to just return out of this. We're not going to create any more workers. So that is kind of a check we should probably go ahead and do. So let's do something the same here. If this.has max workers, you know, we would just want to return, like, it's fine. This job can consider to be passed. So here we could do something like, if it doesn't have that, then we do this, and then like now it's like return, we would say bool, and like return shift get, or sorry, cache get shift workers is less than like config shifts max workers or something like that. Yeah. So long as the number of workers that are currently out there is less than the current number of workers, then it's okay to go ahead and create another one. So just a little thing we're thinking of there. So again, I think we will need to track the individual workers and be a little bit smarter about that naming. But for now, we still would want to track this simply for the fact that, you know, we need to know how many workers are there. I don't want to spin up like 100 workers just because the queue is backed up by 30 minutes. That's going to end up costing me more than just having a dedicated worker. Let's fix this failed to do, and then let's get into the beef of it here, which is to check the actual number of processes being on the queue. So this is actually going to need to tap into Horizon, which are some of the PRs that I made last week. But first, let's go back out to here. Let's look at jobs, failed jobs, yeah. And let's see, I always forget if it's failed or fail. Yeah, it's failed. I thought it was. All right, so this is failed, and we have throwable. And here we would just do something like mail to config shift.support email, I think is what it is. And then we would want to send some kind of new mail notification. So we would just say new failed to destroy worker this ID. Cool. And we can make that. This is like app mail. Yeah. All right, so there it is. We'll finish that guy later. What's wrong with you? Oh, let's see. Yeah, we need the fanciness here. Let's get this. This is where artisan make comes in handy. I don't want to spin up Docker just for artisan make though. I should get into, I should create a sale instance for Laravel shift. I think it would make life easier. So anyway, I'll fill in the blanks here later. Let's just do always search by these to-do tags. Finish me. All right, cool. Okay, so we actually send our exception, we actually send a notification now that this failed. So that's going to go to the support email address. I'm going to see that. It's going to tell me which worker, and then I can just go into DigitalOcean and kind of figure out what's going on. So again, this is just a little cleanup. I would want to know. I don't want to get like charged, again, a crazy amount of money because somewhere in the code here I made a logic, mistake, right? Okay, cool. So next is going to be my espresso is getting cold. Ugh. Okay, so next we need to check for the worker inside Horizon. So I know that Horizon has this like work. It's like a work time calculator or something. Let's just call it calculator. I think they have. And if we do resolve work time, no, it's like, oh, it's wait time, I'm sorry. Wait time calculator, there it is. If we pull this wait time calculator, we can do something like calculate. Am I wrong? I thought it had calculate. Yeah, calculate 4. What's the matter with you? Why aren't you? Oh, it doesn't know. It doesn't know what that is because resolve. Fair enough. We could do this all in one. So we've got like wait time. And what we would really want here, we need to calculate this for like, let's call it shift shared worker queue. So this is going to let me know, it's going to let me know the queue name that the shared monitoring thing that I'm looking for, you know, is called, right? Because this is a little different, like in Horizon, if we go look at this in Horizon, and this is actually some stuff that I was PRing, inside of Horizon, they actually kind of, you kind of name your queues, but inside of it, if you have a multi-queue, in this case, if I have the subscriber build paid workbench, you know, free queue, it actually gets string concatenated, you know, all together, or it gets collapsed, if you will, or joined with commas. So I'm going to need to like kind of hack that a little bit, so may as well put it in a configuration value. So we're going to get that wait time, and then here we would basically say if wait time is greater than some kind of threshold, right? But in this case, we can just say, basically if it's greater than 0. I just want to keep these jobs going until that queue is 0. So I'm just going to spin up a crap load of jobs. Hopefully 40 minutes later, everything's normalized. The queue's back to 0. Again, it's pretty unlikely that Laravel shift, it's pretty unlikely that shift has so much of a workload that there wouldn't be a point in time in the future where the wait time was 0, given, you know, all these queues got spawned, or all these extra workers got spawned up. So this should actually happen pretty quickly. If I find that 0 is a little bit too aggressive, again, this could be some kind of threshold, like whatever. But the problem now is because all these jobs would be shared across multiple workers, I don't know that that specific worker does or does not have jobs, right? So the safe thing to do, even though it's a bit aggressive, would say, look, the wait time for this particular shared worker queue is 0. There's no wait, meaning there's no jobs being processed theoretically. There are ways to get better detail from Horizon, but again, that's all in this PR that I'm kind of working on. So if we go kind of take a peek, I've got some PRs that are kind of floating out here. I was testing this the other day, and Taylor brought up a good point that like if you have a multi-queue, you can't really calculate exactly what the queue wait time is, and that's kind of what I'm doing is this multi-queue. So unless I want to change my queue architecture, or unless I finalize this PR, it's a little hard to check exactly a queue within a multi-queue, like how many jobs do you have left, how many are you processing. So for now, this is going to work, but it might be aggressive, meaning that maybe this particular worker could be destroyed, but because there is a job on one of these queues, even though it's being run by another worker, not this worker, you know, I can't necessarily destroy it. But again, I know Shift, it really doesn't get overloaded or backlogged for very long. Again, there might just be a post on Twitter or something on Laravel News, or it's release day of a big major version, and I'm totally comfortable allowing you know, these extra workers to run multiple hours until maybe later in the night or something, it reaches a 0 wait time. I think that's the safest thing. I would love to be able to know that this particular worker has no jobs and blah, 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 because I wouldn't want to like tear down this worker right when there's a job coming. So yeah, I don't, again, all this is a bit of trial and error, but I think that feels pretty good to get started. So let's go back to this name thing. I've got just a few more minutes. Let me know if you have any questions in the chat, but I think we're kind of wrapping up here. So I think the main thing left is to really figure out this shift worker bit. Again, we can't simply name it based on that. We kind of have to name it based on the queues that have kind of been spawned and have come online, right? So let's think here. If I track the names of the workers, I could track the names of the workers and then kind of just get like the highest one of those. Yeah, I mean that wouldn't be like too exceptionally hard, I don't think. And that's how you would end up naming the worker. In a way, though, you'd almost have to like lock that in case two jobs, were spawned at the same time. But because of the queue workers, theoretically this gets called, in order, and the queue workers are happening in this for, or we're spawning new workers in a for loop. So it's pretty unlikely that multiple create worker jobs would be on the queue at the exact same time. But if you wanted to be super safe, this probably needs to be like an atomic thing where you name a worker. So for those reasons, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to cut this out, and I think I'm going to turn this into a method, worker name, and yeah, we're really not going to pass anything into it. I don't think we need anything. Okay, so let's try to hack this together here real quick and make it be somewhat intelligent. So, or at least let's pseudocode it out. So we would basically say get current count. So we have that with this, right? We basically just get the number of shift workers that are currently out there plus 1. This gives us kind of a baseline of workers that are there. Okay, so we have that, and then we would basically want to see if that name exists in current workers, and then if so, yeah, if that name exists in current workers, then we would basically get max worker, or get max number from existing workers plus 1. Otherwise, else return name. Okay, so this is kind of the pseudocode here. So we got the workers, and then if it exists in our current workers name, then we would know that we need to get the highest one of all of our workers and then just start there. Otherwise, the name that we came up with is the name that is acceptable. So we can handle this else. So let's just say return sprintf, or we're always going to return like sprintf, %s, %0, 2D. If anyone's actively watching, please let me know if this is the right syntax. I keep kind of guessing there. So shift worker, and then this will be worker. All right, so we're always going to return that, but here it's kind of just like, here's our test. So we would kind of say like if cache get shift worker names or something like that contains. Can you cache a raw array? I guess it gets serialized, right? Like that's no big deal. Yeah. So I think we could say like workers equals that. It should get deserialized, I guess. And then we would we would need to build this name. So we would say name equals that. And then basically if not an array, name workers, then we could return name. otherwise, whoops, I deleted that too aggressively. So otherwise we would need to get the max number from existing workers plus 1, and then we would return that. Cool. I'm hearing some stuff in the chat. Let's see what was it. I think you can simplify the logic by cache list of workers directly instead of that count. Your sprintf works. Yes, cool. Race condition. Yeah, exactly. I think this is going to need to be locked. Yeah, you're right. I could just track shift workers and then get the count from it all the time. I just thought it was kind of cool to use increment and decrement. They also serve two different purposes in fairness. Just because this worker count has been incremented, it doesn't mean that that worker is actually online yet. It could actually be failing. So this worker actually never gets created. So again, I don't necessarily want to throw that in there just yet. So because of this race condition and this loop and all these other things, you know, it is possible that I asked for O1 to be created, but O1 was never necessarily created. But I can't necessarily use that name again because this call is kind of attempting to happen, or maybe it never comes online, right, for some reason. So I think they need to be separate, because it's not true that just because the worker's been created that it actually is running queues, and so therefore I would want to continue to try to create these workers. So again, there is some potential, again, atomic locking that we might want to do on create workers specifically. So we'll come back to that here in just a minute. But let's finish this up, because I think we're pretty close here. So we would really just want to go through these queue worker names and then find the max. So I think we could just sort them on name and get the very first one, right? And then just increment it effectively. Yeah, so I think we could just say like r sort workers, and then we could say like array first, array key first. It's not really the key. It'd just be the first one in the array. Yeah, it would really just be like the first one in the array. So we would basically say worker equals str of workers 0, the first one in the array, and then it would be like after, let's bring in the string so we get some auto completion here. So after last dash, and then I guess toString, or we could ltrim 0 off of it, and then toString that. Yeah, toString that. Crazy. Okay, so we're going to get the last worker, we're going to toString that, and then we kind of want, like, I wish you could do like integer or something. That would be cool. That would be pretty neat if you could do like 2 integer. That might be like a PR that I do, to be honest. That would be really cool, because what I'm going to have to do here, I'm pulling out a string from this, but what I'm basically going to have to do is like int val this thing and then +1 it. So that would be cool if you could do like 2 integer there. I don't know. Let me know what you think about that in the chat. Okay, so I think this would work. So here's what we're doing, just to recap. And again, forget the atomic nature of this that might need to take place. Here's what's happening. We're going to call worker name. We're going to return a string. And here we're going to get out of the cache the number of current workers. This is just our starting point of what we think the worker count would need to be. We're going to get the worker names, and we're going to build the name from that worker. All right, and then if the name that we've made up is not in workers, then we would know, we would know that it's okay to use that name, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that that's the next one in the sequence per se. It just means that, hey, that one was destroyed, and our little naive logic to create the next one, whatever. Now, again, we didn't necessarily have to make this that hard. We could have just used workers directly and kind of dumped all this bit. We could have just r-sorted workers and done the next one in line. But I think it's kind of cool to visually in Horizon, I'd be able to see, oh, okay, 04, I know that I have, 4 workers or something. I think it's worth the extra bit of effort here. And again, this can all get tested here in a bit. But if we do see that worker name in the array, then we're going to r-sort it, reverse sort it, so it's just all the same strings. So we know theoretically that that would show up at the top. And then we're just doing some fancy string of stuff here to get that last little bit that we want. We increment that, and we know that that would be the next number higher than everything else. Now again, we would only know that based on the atomic lock of this. So Adrian, of course, has something that's going to ruin my day. Let's see here. Given you have 01, 02, 03, and 02 gets destroyed, it will create 04 and doesn't fill up the empty gaps. Yes, it won't necessarily fill the empty gaps. I'm not too worried about that part. In theory, if the workers were getting destroyed quickly enough, and then it somehow needed to scale back up, there is a chance you could fill the gap. But yeah, I didn't write any special code to fill the gap. So you're right about that. And for those reasons, like this extra check may not even be worth it. I could just pull the workers out, r-sort them, get the highest one, and know that I'm next in line. That's the simplest approach here. But, we wanted to get fancy. Okay, the final thing to do, I think, would be to start tracking these workers. Again, now that's kind of like where do we start tracking that? Yeah, where would we track that? Cache increment workers. I guess we would have to track it here because theoretically we asked for this worker to be created, and once it has successfully been called to DigitalOcean, we should not create another one of that name. So yeah, it has to go here. So here is where we would need to say like cache put, and this would be shift worker names, and here we would have to like get it and add it and do a bunch of crazy stuff. Here we would have to know like workers, and that's going to kind of interfere with, let's just say names, just to help us out. So names is equal to cache get shift worker names, otherwise it's an empty array, and then names plus name, more or less, right? Now name can come from here, but what I'm curious about is, can name also come from this? I don't think we need to pull it from the API response, so let's just bar this off. We'll say name, and now we should have the name we need. So this is all the cache incrementing that happens. So check worker remains dumb. Maybe someday I would want to know that that particular worker is now online. That's fine. I could do that here if I needed to, but for now I don't really care. The management of this is pretty dumb. Here, though, I would want to decrement the worker and then remove it from the cache value as well. So here we would say get, and then same thing here, shift worker name, and then cache get shift worker name, and otherwise it would still be that. And then we would say, is there an array remove? I always forget. I don't think there's an array remove unless you know the position of it. So I think we can use Laravel's fancy helpers here. I think they have an array remove that just kind of collapses all this logic for you. I thought. Do they not? I could have sworn they had. Ah. Well, fine then. Cache put shift worker name. All this stuff that I'm doing with the cache, I'm getting really close to making some kind of like little service class that just kind of does these things for me, because they're kind of littered all about these things, and I don't like the magic strings that I'm having to type all the time. I don't know. Again, we'll see when I get into testing, but for now, I guess we could say like names equals array intersect or filter. That's just, ugh. It seems so heavy. So the array, or array diff, I guess, is what you do. So array diff on names and remove the current worker's name. Ugh, this is gross. See, I don't even have the worker's name here either. Yeah, this gets weird. Where's my name? Right? Where's that thing? I don't even have the name. Yeah, I'm gonna have to like to do track name. Or I'm gonna have to pass it in here. I should get it back in DigitalOcean. Let's find out if I get it back from DigitalOcean. Maybe I can just use digital, and then I better get going. I think I have an 11 o'clock, so yeah, I've got about 5 minutes. Okay, DigitalOcean API droplets. Let's see here. Let's jump into the droplets. I'm sure you get the name back. If so, I could have check status, pass it on. So let's go here and retrieve an existing droplet. 200 gives me the droplet, and of course it gives me the name. The human readable name set for the droplet instance. Awesome. Okay, cool. So we have here, theoretically from this response, I could also get the worker name. So we could just say response. I'll check the chat here in just a second. Let me finish my train of thought. So let's go to display worker. We're going to get an int of an ID and a string for the name. We'll go ahead and initialize that property. And down here we should have this arrow name. Okay, again, very ugly, but we decrement it and we pull it out of the names that exist. Shift worker names. This is exactly why I want to wrap this up, because that is getting very ugly. Okay, let's check the chat and see what's going on. Adrian, you could do some logic in the destroy job to shut down the worker with the highest digits. Yeah, I'll think on all this a bit more. I definitely understand some of the comments. There is some overlap here of decrementing and incrementing. The worker names thing is, maybe it's not that critical, you know. I mean, I could just put like a random string behind there, but right now I'm used to workers that are 01, 02, 03, right? That's just how I name them myself. So to have some kind of sequence, to continue that sequence makes sense. And again, we're really talking about probably some edge cases where these somehow get out of whack, where like O2, there's a gap, you know. I'm not going to have that kind of tremendous workload. You know, this isn't Forge or something that's just constantly crushing jobs, right? You know, Shift might have 100 jobs in a day, and even on like a heavy release or something, you know, there might be 200 or 300 jobs on the release day. So like, again, I think the workers are going to scale up uniformly and scale down uniformly, and for those reasons, I don't think this needs a lot of extra work. I still think the number of workers needs to be tracked separately, because this stuff isn't, you know, it's all happening asynchronously. I don't think I could rely solely on the worker names to know how many active queues are out there. So I think there's a difference in the intention of these cached values to kind of see what's going on. The other thing too is, I mean, you know, we could get crazy and we could say, okay, well, what happens if your cache, you know, gets reset or something, right? Well, I'm going to have bigger problems because Redis at that point, because all this is using Redis, that would mean that underlying Redis went down. So all my jobs are dropped off the queue anyway. So I would have bigger problems, you know, if the cache went away or got reset. So the point is, these serve two different intentions. So I just need to kind of like define those a little bit better. And I think this would end up being a bit more clear. But at the end of the day, I'm not worried about gaps. The sequential naming is just a nice to have for me to kind of feel like all these workers are kind of as expected right now. And again, I don't expect the scaling to be happening at such a rate or so continuously that I'm going to end up with like 99 workers or some weird name, right? So I think it'll be fine. How do you handle the deletion of abandoned workers? That's what this destroy worker is doing. It calls a delete here on that droplet with the ID. So that's basically, oh, there's my cue to quit. So yeah, so that's what destroy worker is going to do. It's going to hopefully tear it down. And then let's see here. You could just pass the name to the job. You could prefix. Yeah, again, there's 1,000 things you could do. Yeah, and again, you have to remember, all this is pretty much a spike. I'm going to write the test for this. That's going to allow, I'm going to backfill the test for this. That's going to allow me to kind of think it through and see it with some quote unquote real data or real action. And then of course, when I deploy this and 99 jobs are created, I'll let you know the issue. So, but I think for now, this is a good naive implementation. It's a good first pass, and that's really what I'm all about. You know, I like to write the code pretty quickly. I really didn't do any of this offline other than kind of dig into Horizon, which I was doing for those PRs anyway. So these 3 jobs that we see here, let's go ahead and kind of take a look at them. Yeah, I mean, these 3 jobs, check worker, create worker, check worker, destroy, you know, in this email, all this was done during these 2 streams. So what, 2.5 hours of work, maybe a half hour of research on the DigitalOcean docs. I mean, yeah, in 3 hours I've built this. It's going to save me, you know, maybe $100 a month, which, you know, at shift scale isn't necessarily something I need to worry about saving, but at the same time, you know, it's nice. You know, that's several cups of coffee right there. So we'll go for it. Anyway, thank you all for joining live. I'll probably start a different feature or something next week, so let me know on Twitter if there's anything you would like to hear about. Otherwise, again, thanks for the input and joining me live, and I'll see you all next time.